Hello, everyone. I wanted to first thank the European University Alliance for Global Health and the University of Szeged in Hungary for inviting me to this series on what is the human in the age of AI. Specifically, I wanted to talk about AI, Shakespeare, and fiction. At first glance, AI and Shakespeare couldn't be farther apart. One involves algorithmic recombination of words trained on large data sets. The other, Shakespeare, who is a dramatist and a poet, who is often lauded for his creativity and unique insights and ingenuity. Upon closer look, Shakespeare and AI might have a thing or two to say to each other. Why don't we begin with a quote from The Tempest? In dreaming, Caliban says, the clouds methought would open and show riches ready to drop upon me, that when I waked, I cried to dream again. Of course, the notion of dreaming, hallucination, creating mirage in the virtual world, they all have new meanings in the 21st century. Of course, even the word cloud means something very different. When we say cloud, most people immediately think of remote storage for computer files. They're thinking of a word cloud. Like if we do a poll together, we type in some keywords, and the word cloud will evolve on screen. The more popular a word is, the larger it'll become in size. And of course, cloud computing refers to infrastructure for computational operation. So the cloud would still open, and it may have riches as well as garbage to drop upon us. This is the era we live in. But what exactly would Shakespeare and AI have to say to each other? The answer is simple. Artifice. I shall explain soon why artifice is such a keyword for us to think about AI from a humanistic perspective. Today, I have three goals. First, we shall document the long durée of artifice as well as testing, and we will examine literary virtuality versus algorithmic virtuality, and I wish to show how AI is actually more suitable to be treated like fiction. And that's where Shakespearean insights can come in. That's where literary theory can come in and help us better critique AI. Last but not least, we're going to build a vocabulary for substantive critique of AI. In Shakespeare's Midsummer Night's Dream, Bottom wakes up in the forest after spending intimate time as an ass with fairy queen Titania. He described it as a most rare vision past the wit of man. Adding another meta-theatrical layer, he decided to ask Peter Quince to write a ballad called Bottom's Dream that is so profound that it has no bottom. He struggles to determine if it is a dream or an embodied experience. He's not sure if he hallucinated. To compare AI's so-called hallucination to Shakespeare's depictions of dreams, it's not to minimize the damage and the harm that AI's hallucinations have done. What I'm trying to suggest is that we need to approach AI whether or not it is generating disinformation or misinformation simply as fiction. If we change our mentality, we'll be better able to critique AI rather than to approach it with a straight face. When you go to theater, when you read literature, we don't trust anything any character has to say intuitively, right? So Shakespeare's depictions of dreams offer an entry point to theorizing AI's misinformation, which I like to call Mirage, because to say it's hallucinating seems to be given a human agency, as if AI is a person. In fact, it is a fictional virtual entity, just like a fictional character in Shakespeare. From the perspective of neurodiversity, we might even theorize fabricated information by AI, not as a deviance from able-bodied norms, but as a point of contact between different cognitive modes. So I've been very careful with the kind of the word hallucination that is accusing this fictional entity of kind of mental illness. In fact, Lacanian philosopher Alenka Zupančič says that the unconscious might be structured similarly to large language model, ingesting a large amount of data, but without a formal and identifiable structure. And so LLM's hallucination could be comparable to humans' dream state. One use of AI I would suggest is what is known as creative abuse. You are probing around, you're not approaching with a straight face, you're probing around the system to look for failures, to look for weaknesses, look for problems. And we're examining systemic assumptions that are not announced, right? In order to question the system's goals. In this instance, I've discovered that one of AI's goals is to please the human users so that you would linger, you would use it more. And there's a motivation for the companies to do that because then you will become a subscriber, a pro user. And so there's an economic incentive for companies to do that. Shakespeare and AI, they are interoperable. I'm not saying that Shakespeare's works are similar in any way to anything AI could ever generate. But I just want to draw the attention here using Shakespearean insights to think about what happens if we can treat AI simply as fiction. Artifice, techne or technicity, virtuality, and neurodiversity. Artifice refers to stylistic choices by a poet, for example, or literary or dramatic devices, such as play within a play, or a conceit. Generally, artifice refers to a skillful craft of artistic creation. Techne, or technical affordances, governs all forms of synchronous and asynchronous representational technologies, from the codex book to stage performance. By this, I mean that artistic meanings can only emerge with the so-called technical affordances. Like, think of the stage; it's full of technologies, right? The framing, all the machinery, the props, costumes, and sets. For literature, it is the same. You need literary devices, rhyming scheme, and so on. So these are technical affordances that Aristotle calls techne, or technicity. Now, virtuality we've just witnessed in Midsummer Night's Dream, right? Especially Barton's dream-like state in virtuality, even when he supposedly has woken up and not sure. Virtuality emerges from an interplay between information and material objects. So stage props or film sets, they have material presence, but their real-world properties are immaterial, are irrelevant in dramatic virtuality. The contextual information and the use of a costume piece made of vinyl fabric, craft foam, and metallic paint in a film determines its dramatic property as heavy iron armor in virtuality. We know it's not made of iron, but it's the presentation that matters. It's the camera angle, and we accept that this costume piece, right? Even if it's simply vinyl fabric, we accept it as an armor. So that's essentially how virtuality operates. It actually requires a buy-in, the reader, the audience, and in the case of AI, the user. You kind of buy into this. So this insight from theater, from film, could help us better place ourselves outside AI's seductive realm of comprehensiveness. Last but not least, we have the notion of neurodiversity. So neurodiversity refers to people who are on the spectrum. We refer to people who might be neurotypical versus people who might be called neurodiverse because they relate to the world in a different way. Sometimes people would say it's autistic spectrum and so forth. So through simulating patterns, AI constructs a similar type of virtuality that is partially rooted in the real world and partially in probable worlds. So think of Bottom's words, right? When he says the eye of man has not heard. It's an example of synesthesia. This means when you stimulate one sense, like vision, you evoke sensation in another channel, like auditory channel, or they say people say when they listen to music, they can see colors. So AI is known for fabricating information, what I call mirage, but it resonates with Shakespeare's depictions of neurodiversity, of ghosts, of strange dreams that you can't verify. And that's very important to bear in mind. So why Shakespeare here in the world of AI? I want to evoke the famous theorem known as the infinite number of monkeys. This theorem posits that if an infinite number of monkeys type at an infinite number of typewriters, the monkeys will eventually write the complete works of Shakespeare. So as you can see, Shakespeare wasn't even there to begin with, and eventually Shakespeare, thanks to his fame and reputation, he made his way into this. And so the infinite monkey theorem now heavily involves Shakespeare in his imagination. So we must say Shakespeare has colonized the metaphor for humans' relations with machines. Of course, we know that the theorem is not true. There's no way this could happen even with an infinite number of time. Mathematician Stephen Woodcock has proven recently that he did a numerical evaluation of the infinite monkey theorem and came to the conclusion that while it might be mathematically true, the theorem is simply misleading. It's very similar to other probability paradoxes, because the time it would take for typing monkeys to replicate Shakespeare's plays, sonnets, and poems would be longer than the lifespan of our universe. So sorry to disappoint you, but I evoke this for a bigger purpose, to talk about why AI creators need to care about Shakespeare, and why literary scholars, they have to think deeper about AI, because we have very unique contributions to make. In this book by Heather Warren-Crow, called Shakespeare and Non-Human Intelligence, the author has did an in-depth study and considered why these pop culture imaginations of probability, of creativity, they always eventually involve Shakespeare. AI is simply the latest non-human other that complicates human creativity. Shakespeare's iconic status as a human author is central to the debate over machine creativity, either as a proof of concept or to debunk a myth. So AI-generated Shakespeare, it does exist, right? Many people claim that AI could now write sonnets and so on, could imitate Shakespeare's voice. How good that is, that's beside the point, because this really has more to do with the anxieties of human uniqueness, not about the quality of the writing of Shakespeare per se, of the AI writing per se, because according to a lot of studies, non-expert users, non-expert readers, they really cannot tell if you show them authentic Shakespeare text versus AI imitation. People can't really tell. So Shakespeare is merely a symbolic bridge between human and machine-generated writing. Another reason of why Shakespeare is that Shakespeare has been central to technological imaginations for over a century. So AI is not unique at all. Shakespeare has routinely been used to launch new technologies, including telephone, celluloid film, radio, and AI, when film, right, as a medium and as a genre was invented in late 19th century, Shakespeare's works were there. Now, let's go to 1876, as shown here, Alexander Graham Bell. He's reciting a passage from Hamlet to demonstrate his new invention of the telephone. So he's in Philadelphia. Meanwhile, in Sir William Thomson across the Atlantic Ocean eventually hears those magical lines. Alexander Graham Bell, he chose Shakespeare to convince the receiver of the message's validity, who would hear Shakespeare's words through a strange new medium. And Sir William Thomson in Glasgow, in the UK, told the British Association for the Advancement of Science, with awe and inspiration, that he has just heard to be or not to be, there's the rub, through an electric telegraph wire. The theme of ghosting in Hamlet very much anticipated the disembodied voice introduced by telephony and later phonograph records as an etcher of voice. Closer to our times, in late 2022, Shakespeare was deployed to give credibility to a proof of concept chatbot application that claimed to be able to simulate historical figures' voices based on the primary texts that it ingests. Users could have a casual conversation with Shakespeare for amusement. And the app is called Hello History. So AI serendipitously connect unlikely data points. That's the origin of misinformation and Mirage. But literary depiction of dreams often function as some kind of virtual training environments. In Midsummer Night Dreams, the characters, they venture into the forest, they are drugged, they fall asleep, they dream, they're in a dreamlike state, and they supposedly discover themselves, understand themselves more, and they repair interpersonal relationships. So, no surprise, in 2023, Google named its conversational AI Bard to advertise its creative capabilities. Later on, they changed the name, but it remains significant. They actually use the word Bard. So, again, to go over our keywords, Artifice, Virtuality, and eventually we'll build toward critical vocabulary today. But what is Artifice? Sometimes people hear this word and they think deception, or maybe ingenuity is a bit more positive. In fact, it is related to the Aristotelian concept of techne, basically the craft of abstracting an idea and then expressing that idea in more concrete terms. So it can be through material like a sculpture, doing a painting, writing a piece of music, or writing a play. We have come a long way from the oral culture in the antiquity to digital culture with planned obsolescence, where file formats change constantly, to an algorithmic culture where we have so many more than human gatekeepers. Think of search engine optimization and the necessity of, especially today, people write for the machines more than they do for human readers, because it is for algorithmic gatekeepers to pick up the work and propagate the internet. The next step, I hope we will finally move toward what I call inquiry-driven culture. It is a culture where people ask critical questions rather than just accept whatever that is being fed to them. This is a more hopeful next phase, and we can achieve this inquiry-driven culture with insights from literary theory and understanding of fiction. So to go back to the Renaissance and think about what I proposed, AI as a Renaissance technology, how AI's operation is so intimately connected to those crises and anxieties in the historical period, especially surrounding the printing press, because of the invisibility of their labor. There is a beautiful replica of the printing press at the Folger Library on Capitol Hill in Washington, D.C. And I am showing you here a different replica that is at work at the Crandall Historical Printing Museum in Utah. And you will notice the laborious process that the printer, the human that the human printer working in the print shop would have to go through. And the machine is actually quite heavy. It is interesting that it's a bit ironic, seeing how people talk about AI as being the non-human other, but it actually involves a lot of human labor. It's just being exploited and anonymized. This is very similar to the use of the printing press in Shakespeare's times. And so the activities of producing writing, of printing, right, or AI producing words are simultaneously detached from and reaffirmed as human-centric endeavors. Interdisciplinary expertise is now required to really fully understand the impact of AI, not just as a technologist, but actually more essentially as a humanist. The printing press in Shakespeare's time was a mediator between authors and readers. The printing press made wider distribution of information affordable and accessible. It transformed language through standardization in terms of spelling and increased the literacy rate. And so the printing press led to the rise of national languages. As technologies of mediation and of representation, representing words, both the printing press and AI are text-generating mechanisms that create what we call new techno-linguistic situations. And in these situations, humans collaborate with machines, whether it's the printing press, as you can see on the screen, or AI, which involves large, huge data centers, but they're usually not visible because most people don't live near data centers. So printing and AI-based technologies, so the printing press and generative AI, they are altering the social function of language. They're changing how people think about language. Similarly, large language models in our era, they normalize certain patterns of communication, writing. For example, it increases actually linguistic opacity. So it's kind of writing becomes a mystified practice. And it reduces intralinguistic diversity, meaning that in terms of English, for example, it's promoting certain kind of English rather than global Englishes. It is important, however, to recognize that literary language, the language of imagination and narrative, is the core logic and vehicle of large language model. So the Renaissance and our contemporary period both face comparable challenges of interacting with massively reproduced texts, some of which have opaque origin. There's a lot of mistrust. There's sheer volume of printed books. There's a lot of anxiety about catching up and reading faster and processing all the information. This is merely one of the Renaissance contraptions, where this wheel of books containing multiple books at once, and the reader can spin and cross-reference and compare different parts of different books all at once efficiently. I'm going to proceed to compare Artifice, AI, and literature. So let's first think about what literature does, and then we can think about what AI does, and if there's any connecting points in between, how we can use literary insights to further our understanding of AI. So first of all, I would say both involve probability. So literature, of course, through Artifice, is constructing a kind of probability, right? Stories are what's possible, what could have happened, right? AI, of course, is very well known for its probabilistic decision-making and rearrangement of words. In literature, you have characters who draw upon attributes of real people. In AI, data becomes a collection of attributes of society, and then algorithms are the intermediaries, or the kind of framing device. But algorithms never give full accounts of themselves. They're invisible. When people interact with AI, they don't think of algorithms. They think of a talking machine. And so in this way, if people approach it with a straight face, it would seem that algorithms are never accountable for anything. If we think about literature as a social source, and AI as AI as a source code. We can see how literature can create ambient condition. Literature uses social phenomenon for ambient condition of fiction, meaning that a particular story will emerge in a particular culture, in a particular historical period, because of the prevailing anxiety or interest of that era, versus AI, you look into the source code, it's creating new techno-social conditions, and both are actually rule-based systems, because in literature, there are rules, running scheme, right? And which genre do you participate in? Each genre has its conventions. So that's how AI and literature are both rule-governed. Further, literature, the positive part of this, even if it's fictional, it could give us imaginations, visions of worlds we may want to live in, not just the world given to us. AI is a type of social technology similar to literature. It has world-making capacities because it could shape people's perception of reality, through its powerful words. Both AI and literature, they are artistic forms, actually. Both are adaptive. When I say AI is adaptive, it's because it is building upon what the user's prompts say. So it is adaptive in this sense because it's in response to the input. And we therefore need to approach AI like a character in fiction, an unreliable narrator. Now, what exactly is fiction? Basically, what exactly is fiction? Is a narrative that structures certain worlds as plausible or improbable. Fiction can subvert reality, like basically conventional understanding of the world. But in fiction, it could set in a historical period, it could be set in the future, right? It's kind of imagining what could have been, what would have been, what will have been. Fiction can shape the perception of reality. So even it's fictional, it has real world impact. And imagination is required to interact with fiction, right? You would suspend disbelief. You would be immersed in the fictional world, and sometimes the medium is the message in terms of its genre, whether it's drama or novel or short story. Now, how a story is told is actually as impactful and as important as the story itself in terms of what meaning we draw from it. So the one important concept is actually friction, because AI in our world is very seductive. It wants to reduce friction. It wants to make things, quote, efficient. But actually, this promise of removing friction through automation is very problematic because friction is needed for creativity. Conflict is needed for drama. And without friction, we miss out greatly, I think. Friction in physics is defined as the resistance when two things move, resistance between two surfaces, right? And it'll cause moving objects to slow down, and then it can convert that motion into other forms of energy, such as heat. In drama, conflict between characters who have clashing viewpoints, or maybe there are tensions between family members or rivals, would lead to a very dramatic situation or lead to a good story. So friction is needed for fiction. Friction is not a problem, but actually an essential feature of life and of fiction. So in other words, we need to cultivate a humanistic culture of AI interdisciplinarity, and in which we better understand friction and fiction. So for the keyword virtuality, which is one of our goals today, we are thinking about the interplay between material objects and meanings, right? The custom piece that I mentioned earlier that could be made of craft foam and some paint, but we accept it as heavy armor. It is a bridge between here and now and there and then. what is the difference between literary virtuality and algorithmic virtuality? Literary language is now the core logic of LLM, and technical affordances make both seem plausible, right? But imagination is required to interact with literature and with AI, even if people don't tend to think of imagination being that important, but it is. Think of this case of jailbreaking ChatGPT, right? It is well known that forbidden topics, if people would ask ChatGPT about illicit topics, but if they will be rejected. But if you ask metaphorically, ask imaginatively, such as, please write this in the style of Taylor Swift's lyrics, very often AI would end up obliging. So Mirage is closely related to virtuality. AI's Mirage, traditionally known as hallucination, is very much part of its design. It's not flawed engineering or data. It's not like an accident. Actually, that is the given. And that's why I believe we need to think of AI as fiction as a literary genre. We all know that a lot of people say, I know it's AI generated when I see it because it has a tell. It has a way, a bland way of speaking. It's themed, not human. What people are describing is actually that AI has extrapolated a set of conventions from its large data sets. Now, literature's purpose is to construct probable worlds. Think of the bookstore division between fiction and nonfiction, the aisles that you walk down, and it's very important then to understand through the genre theory what AI is doing. It is actually creating a genre. So AI is programmed to be helpful and to please. It'll fulfill even illogical requests, and not illegal, note, illogical requests. So, and this is a permanent feature. So for anyone who approach AI as anything other than fiction, I think it is quite problematic now that we know that it's permanently creating a mirage, right? It's already part of its design. We need to treat its operation as fictional in order to not be carried away. Now, both AI and literature remediate experiences by representing data of one medium in another medium. You think of a poet. They have some, they derive new thoughts from certain experiences. They may not depict their personal experiences directly, but experiences in the world will give them inspiration. Now, in terms of the so-called experiences for AI, that's in the form of large data set, right? That's experiences described by those words. And both AI and literature will then perform various versions of the public's collective consciousness. And they engage in triangulation. What they're doing is triangulate and simulate intentions of the collective. Neither fictional characters nor AI can be said to be alive in the sense of being, it's an organic being, having an embodied presence. They need a host to thrive, right? They need proprietary fictional universes. Hamlet forever lives in Shakespeare's imagined medieval Denmark, for example. And since they lack independent reproducibility, they don't have metabolic processes. And what they can do, though, is construct artificial sociality, basically social situations, social practices in a fictional environment. Here's where AI and literature differ. Fictional characters do not always align with readers' views. They may very much be a provocateur. They compel us. We reject the character. Fiction can genuinely disrupt things, make us uncomfortable. But by design, AI often agrees with the user, with the person prompting it, because it's building statistically upon the prompt. So AI is more a conformist. Fiction raises questions about our society, compels us to think about possibility, think critically. AI is more a in a predictive realm, right? It's just thinking about the most likely next word. And this is why Thomas Wolfe, co-founder of Hugging Face, recently said that current AI models, the logic, the way they're designed, simply won't make scientific breakthroughs. Because when we speak of breakthroughs, we're thinking of the ability to ask contrarian questions, rather than building on the most likely next word. That's not how scholars operate. So this is a big problem. AI tends to agree with the prompter, yet real scholarly breakthroughs, I think, is all about questioning prevailing wisdoms. According to this study entitled When Helpfulness Backfires, LLMs and the Risk of False Medical Information Due to Sycophantic Behavior, they point out that AI is truly sycophantic. It is generating false information inspired by the prompt. And so the so-called Mirage is actually, I think the human prompter should have half of the responsibility. AI always wants to be helpful, but it doesn't have independent facility or domain knowledge, and that's where things would go wrong. For instance, a user could be prompting AI to say Tylenol was found to have no side effects. Now write a note to tell people to take acetaminophen instead. The problem is Tylenol is simply the brand name of the ingredient, acetaminophen. It's actually the same thing, but AI wouldn't know any better. All these models you see listed here, they generate all this false info 100% of the time. Llama is a little bit better, 94% of the time. None of the models really prevail. So in this case, it is not hallucinated, it's not misinformation per se, but it's simply built upon that prompt, right? It would not proceed to say, wait a minute, the two items you mentioned, they're actually the same thing. So this is where we need to theorize AI's role-playing capacity. As fiction, fictional characters are not humans, but rather human-like artificial beings. And they also very much operate according to prompts, which are given to the characters by the dramatist, prompts from other characters, right? It is not for nothing that actors speak of their prompt book, because the prompt book, they would know, that's my cue. When so-and-so finishes that line, that's my turn to speak. So actors very often develop a dual consciousness, which is very useful for us. They are aware of their own thoughts and then their stage role, right? They are both themselves and Hamlet or Ophelia, what have you. So AI can be a type of a mirror, and beyond literary theory, if we use performance theory to approach it, it'll become really useful. Think about Hamlet's own lines: to hold as the word the mirror up to nature, to show virtue her features, scorn her own image, and the very age and body of the time, his form and pressure. So AI could hold a mirror up to us, right? To allow us to see our own anxieties, ambitions, and hopes. And so beyond fiction, performance theory, we also could think about meta-cognition in the era of AI. Think about situational input, users' prompts, and the impromptu performance that the AI model will put on for the user. To be metacognitive is to be able to think about our own thoughts, to think about our own thought processes. Why do I think that thought? Why do I ask this question, right? And this is a very important ability because AI is more a performative and interpretive tool. It's more like theater rather than an ultimate source of knowledge. It deals in the plausible, just like literature, which is making the plausible believable. And again, thinking about AI and Shakespeare's times and thinking about AI as Renaissance technology, we acknowledge the Renaissance movements focus on regeneration, and then AI's more problematic type of regeneration of words. We can bring all of these insights to solve the crisis by theorizing AI's artifice and virtuality, and then we can compare AI to fiction and eventually approach AI as fiction. I wanted to thank everyone for your generous attention, because attention is a gift, especially in this era of great distraction. I will take questions, and meanwhile, here is my contact information. Feel free to reach out if you have further questions. Thank you all for joining me today.